Good afternoon. This is Anthony Tharp again. Just updating our information on what's happening. I submitted a video yesterday. Hopefully, some people got an opportunity to look at it and draw conclusions. Just wanted to clarify. Some people might be wondering why such a wide topic. And varying areas. I talked about, the courts, talked about sentencing, talked about corruption, we talked about Mr. Bolt. And that's simply because everything is tied in, everything is interlocked, interrelated. So one is going to affect the other. And for persons like myself who believe in walking the straight and narrow, and being a law-abiding citizen of the world, we have to avoid a lot of issues which put us on the wrong side of the law. We don't want to have that done. And so people like me have to work through with the system as it exists with the hope that where it's bad, we try to fix it. I don't think we're citizens on the planet to just come and accept life as it's thrown at us, and when we know something is wrong, we don't fix it and try to leave it for somebody else. So like I said before, I'm Jamaican, born, bred, and proud to be, and there are lots of things that's happening in this country that aren't so good. Jamaica will always be physically a beautiful country, but ultimately anywhere we go in the world, the real value of a country is not the physical, the topographical or geographical features of the country, but its people. That's what makes a difference. They have lots of beautiful countries around the world, but nobody wants to live there because of the life-threatening issues which exist, which makes quality of life really, really horrible. And the reality is that it's not about money. You have lots of countries where people, when compared to other parts of the world, are dirt poor, but they live a good quality of life because they're not faced with a lot of the stress related with a country that's rapidly growing. And this is Jamaica. Our people are modernizing as rapidly as any part in the world, and technology and the internet and you name it, we are exposed to it. I don't think there are any Jamaicans here that are unfamiliar with any kind of technology. We might be able to afford all of it, not yet. But the reality is that we are very sophisticated people, and so, like all sophisticated societies, then we shouldn't sit around and just simply wait for the guillotine to fall. Because when it does fall and we have no control, it's going to hurt. So, again, I compared what we're going through and connected to what the Prime Minister was saying about sentencing, and that was being done just in case you missed it, to say to all of Jamaica and the courts and the judges and the people working there is that people who the courts give sentencing currently of 15 years and less for major crimes, taking people's lives, which we vehemently object to. Nobody has a right to do that. Regardless of whether you're government or police or whatever, you don't have the right to do that. We've been through the world. I've seen the world with a couple of really tyrants running the countries around the world and creating havoc for its citizens and other related people. Right now there's a situation in Ukraine, and for most modern thinkers, we wouldn't believe that could have happened in the 21st century. But that's because we've ignored everything that's going on around the planet. For example, that kind of thing is happening in Africa and has been happening in Africa since they tore Africa apart and divided it, and European countries took parts of it for themselves and started to exploit it. It has never stopped. And we look every day and we want our relatives in Africa. And I say relatives because I'm not just going to say, the social branding, our brothers and sisters. No, it goes beyond that. These are our blood relatives, our family. That's where we came from. A large percentage of us came directly from Africa, and those who have some other genetic makeup um, have minor percentages. And I'm not saying don't claim those percentages. You're entitled to it. That's your blood. But I'm saying our countries were really predominantly as descendants of Africa. And I'm wishing that one day Africa will come together and decide to drop the term Africa and go back to its original names. I think one of those names was Kemet. You could check the Bible. The Bible reference is Africa, not as Africa, because Africa didn't exist then, just like the Middle East. And from they coined it Africa and started to do the Middle East thing and splitting up countries. We've had nothing but horrific civil wars, crime, corruption, you name it. Slave trade is still going on. And that's something that should not be happening in the 21st, going into the 22nd century. But it's happening because we don't do anything about it. We don't stand up and be counted because we think it's everybody else's problem to solve other than us, until it begins to affect you and your family directly. So again, why I made a connection between the speech the Prime Minister was making, Mr. Holness, and what's happening to us is simply because it cannot be right or justified for the courts that's there to protect every citizen or every litigant who enters that system to have us literally tied up. Our human rights are being violated by the courts for 20 years, 15 years, 16 years incarceration in the court system for exerting our own rights of our property. And again, these are judgments that we've been successful in landing from 2010 in our case, and yet we have been tied up in court for 15 plus years, and people who kill people and murder people get the same amount of time. So where's the justice? So that's what we're trying to connect. And we can't survive without a judicial system. That must be stated. We can't. It's important that we have one, but we have to implement measures that protect us from the bad people who will infiltrate organizations like judiciary and the court system for their own ends. Because as I've said, anywhere going in the world, including the United States, and you'll find out later when we delve into our experience in future videos, that one of the issues that's affecting us here in this court is that corrupt judges in the United States and trustees in the United States corresponded or collaborated with local attorneys and Capital One to try to defraud us of property. And we're not talking about land now, because they can't take our property. We know that. We have rulings on that. And even though they're playing games and still filing documents and all that nonsense about trespassing, they technically cannot take our property. So that's just a given fact. So, in short, corruption exists everywhere. But for a small nation like Jamaica, a population which is between 3 to 5, maybe 4, if our survey and our census is correct. On this island, we have approximately 3-point-something million people living, compared to a country like 300 plus million in the United States. And statistically, it would seem that we have such a higher degree of corruption than they do. So again, that's why all that we talked about is interrelated and connected. Because if we keep punishing people with the courts in civil matters and other matters to be there for 15-20 years, you're taking those persons' right to life. You're denying it, and they haven't committed any crime. We haven't committed any crime. So that's it. Here today again to just suggest a number of things that could be happening in the judicial process that could help. And Mr. Bolt is heavily in the news, and rightly so. And again, the silver lining behind what happened to Mr. Bolt is that it has brought attention to the corruption and the habitual actions on people to defraud people. And as a result, he has brought a lot of attention to what's going on. But Mr. Bolt will not succeed in recovering any of his funds unless we have a justified court system that's handled with people with the integrity to really search the facts, implement the law, get the evidence, and determine things objectively, which is what is not happening in our situation. And again, I may always make the disclaimer that we know there are judges there that are honest, law-abiding citizens. There are clerks and there are officers of the court, administrators that are honest, law-abiding people with as much integrity as anybody could have. But I'll always reinforce the fact that unless you, the honest person, stand up and clean out the court system, you'll always be part and parcel of the collection when that net is thrown. When we throw a broad net, it's going to pull in everybody, and unfortunately innocent people are going to be affected. And I'm pretty sure you don't want to go down in history as somebody who is involved with committing crime or cheating people out of what they have. So again, it's important that we have that done. And one of the weaknesses I've found in the court system is that I'm not aware that we have any special programs or training or academic studies for people who end up being judges. And I think before we appoint anybody a judge, then that person should go through extensive training and studying and be certified or have a degree or a doctorate in judging, in operating in the courts. Kind of word for it, a course that deals with that before anybody is appointed. I think what happens, a lot of these attorneys, when they're appointed as judges, they go in there with their same bad habits that they used to be practicing in the general course of carrying out their business in court before they're appointed. And so they go there with the same attitude and intention. And even if they initially try to be objective, then they fall right back into the habits that they used to be engaged in the lower courts. So those who used to practice fraudulently and pay people in the court to have files disappear or remove files from the database so it can't be had. So when people go into court to have matters heard, a judge can easily walk in candidly and say, there are no files to be had. And in fact, I had 2 occasions recently when we went to court over this attempt by Miles Fletcher and Gordon Alexis Robinson, who was appearing incidentally on behalf of a company that I own and represent, and the court ruled that I can represent, but she's still appearing, and the courts are allowing her to appear. I don't know why, how come. There's no reason for it, because we already filed documents in the court, so we didn't retain her. But that said, people like that practice fraud and they get away with it, and they end up going back and being appointed later as judges. And so it's all right for them to think it's okay, they're going to continue to get away with it. So we need to have measures in place that before a judge is appointed a judge, attorneys' characters and their track record and their habits and their cases and what they did in those cases should also be studied. We can't have people going into the courts with bad habits and we just appoint them. It's like that a U.S. I think House of Representative person that he's been in the news a lot, where the guy did a whole bunch of illegal stuff, lied, still lying. He won the election, and instead of resigning when he was busted for committing all those fraudulent acts, he's still saying he's not resigning. And in fact, they appointed him to 2 committees. Now, how are you going to appoint people who are committing crimes, lying to the people, supposed to be representing people, and you expect the rest of the nation to be law-abiding and be honest, and kids to come up and have respect for the system and for the truth and objectivity and people's rights? But here we have in the United States, it just did that. The Republicans. And it's the same thing now when you go to Jamaica and that happens. We filed a report against John Graham about what he was doing. Filed it with the General Legal Counsel. And a couple of months after they appoint, they supposedly, I don't know who does it or recommends him for doing that, but he was appointed at that point Queen's Counsel. I hear since the Queen died and a king is now in place, they're saying King's Counsel. I think we really need to get rid of all that garbage. It's nonsense. And if we want to assert ourselves as a people that's not subject to colonization and oppression and being considered inferior, we need to walk away from those kinds of systems that we didn't implement. We need our own judiciary. And most of us don't know. You go to court, they say it's a king's court, it's a queen's court. It's not Jamaica's court. Anyway, those are sidebar arguments and discussions that must be taken up. So one of the things I'm going to drop on all of us, who I'm encouraging to join us and participate in forming a movement to make a difference, is that we must insist that we have special training programs and an educational program, curriculum specific to persons who want to be judges. It's nonsense to pick up anybody off the street and throw them in there and say, be a judge. And they come with all the bad habits. And it will be helpful to persons who fall into what's happening to Mr. Bolt and ourselves, because it's always going to happen regardless of what happened from Jesus' time till now and before. In fact, in Egypt we had a lot of that kind of things happening, corruption, fraud and crime, where pharaohs were murdered. Same thing happened in England. They murdered a couple of themselves their own people to become kings and queens. So we need to change people's outlook on how we approach life and business. It does affect people and how we intend to live in the future. The purpose of our campaign is not to just laud about what happened to us, but to effect real change, because we don't want that to happen to anybody else, and we need to bring our situation to closure. And again, sadly, Mr. Bolt has experienced a lot of negative issues, losing millions and millions of dollars, and which, again, I hope he does recover, if not all, some. But we can't continue to just simply look at those things happening in our culture and accept it and allow those kinds of behaviors to go unchallenged. And some of the things we're looking forward to from the Jamaican population, if nobody else, because this is our country, is for you to step up. Stop just looking at videos. Stop just all this talking on social media and sending comments and everybody shooting off at the mouth, but nobody's actually doing anything. We need to move away from just being talkers and become actors in fixing our business. So don't just read these comments on social media or these presentations or look at these videos. Start writing to the government, filing petitions, your own petitions, groups, your church, your organizations, because again, it's going to affect all of us. And I hope we don't need to be having this conversation over and over again, but it seems repetitive because it seems nothing is happening. And that's what's our problem with the whole Jamaica thing, the law, the court. Because like the FSC's involvement here, they had an opportunity to go in and take action. And while saying that, I'm not saying they didn't do it, but at the same time, they could have prevented this thing from happening to so many people, because as far as my understanding is that there was some illegitimacy in how people's money was handled. they say accounts, but the fact is SSL, I think. I don't know if it's a bank. Is it a bank? I don't know. You comment. If it's a bank, then they're deposit-taking institutions. You have an account. If it's not, then you don't have an account that people can just go in and withdraw money as if they feel like it, unless it's one unusual investment house. So again, people invest must be aware that you could lose everything, and it could be lost legitimately. And hopefully, if there is in fact a legitimate loss, then we can't just be condemning people. I'm not talking about the young lady that confessed to stealing. I'm talking about the investment houses now. If the loss was legitimate bad investment based on bad data and indicators that somebody made, then one should simply look at it that when we made a decision to invest with them, we made a decision that we understood that we could lose our money, and not just turn around at the end of the day because you lost your money and then be crying as if somebody robbed you. When in truth and in fact, that's not the case. Again, we hope whatever Mr. Bolt went through can be remedied, and if illegit, but we have to be fair to the industry, to the world, to economies. People lose money all the time, and whether it's 10 million or 100 million. I remember a couple of years ago during the recession, started in 2008, or depression, worldwide. There were people who went from being a billionaire to bust in days, in weeks. And that has happened throughout history. During the 1930s, I think it was 1939, when you had the big Wall Street crash, people went from millionaires and billionaires to penniless, committing suicide. Do the research yourself. And the same thing happened to a whole bunch of other people all over the world. So again, you can try to mitigate and minimize investment losses, but if the management and team at this investment house was not guilty of committing any wrong, then we shouldn't be prosecuting or going after them. That money should be returned that was legitimately lost. And I say legitimately lost because there is such an occasion. Personally, I think they should have been on top of their game, and an employee stealing or robbing so many people, then it means that management is responsible there, and that should be dealt with. That's not our situation here. There's a movie about the wolves on Wall Street, where guys went together and deliberately defrauded people. Not sure if that's what happened here until we get the facts. And as I've said and recommended to Mr. Bolt, that he should start looking ahead and not just start looking behind on what happened, but look ahead at what he could be doing to reboot his investment portfolio in other ways. So you're young, you have a lot of time ahead of you. Hopefully God will bless you with time and you could recover. But as I said to you before, make sure you're not throwing good money after bad, or chasing the dragon or the monkey on your back, because you never recover it if those persons have the documentation to protect you. So rather than wasting a lot of money in terms of attorneys, save your money and invest it, or what you do is, in this case, because there supposedly are allegations of criminal activity, the state will pursue those persons, and whatever can be recovered will be recovered through the state. The DPP, Mrs. or Miss, what's her name again? Llewellyn, I think. Mrs. Llewellyn, from all I've seen, seem to have our head on our shoulder, and hopefully she'll be able to prosecute these people if they did wrong and recover some of your money. So I don't think you need to go after them to pursue anything, because if you even do a lawsuit against them, it means it probably will be of a class action type with the other persons. And it means, again, you'll have to wait on the public prosecutor to deal with it first before any payment could be made. I'm surprised that this company has not been frozen in its tracks right now. If it hasn't been, it should have been, and no business transaction should be taking place, because the authorities will want to track the money, or track the money that they have on their assets and lock down on it so it can't be moved. And that will fall under, right now, law enforcement and the Department of Public Prosecution. So again, save time and energy and just look to recover. And it's hard, it's difficult, but it can be done. So everybody, I'm not here just to talk and encourage people to keep talking. I'm saying act, protect. Mr. Bolt, protect yourself, protect us, protect yourself. All of us need to act to make sure we protect ourselves. So you need to become a part of a movement that saves this country. Jamaica is on a trip down, going down to hell. And this country is 90% Christians. And yet everybody, including the church, and it's embarrassing that I've reached out to the church and they're so quiet. As for the media, as I said, that's another state of affair that needs to be cleaned up. We need to get media houses in here that are going to be covering the events in the country and reporting on the facts. I just got an email this morning from a marketing agent from the Gleaner. And again, yesterday I said it, we wanted to place an ad about the videos we had with a link. Now we have it up on one of those platform media, so YouTube and a couple others. And the whole idea was, we were hearing arguments that everybody's afraid of being sued. All of this nonsense, that is assumption. But how can you be sued when it's on a public platform elsewhere globally? And we have said we'll accept the liability for it, and all we're doing is advertising a link to a video that we've produced. Now you tell me, as people in a country that have newspapers that should be responsible, and media houses, what's your opinion on that? Can we continue to support these kind of places and that only put out news after it's on social media, when they have first-hand knowledge of it? You're not really journalists if that's what you're doing. I don't know what you call yourselves, but you're not journalists. And you're part of the problem, just like the officers in the JCF who refuse to act. I don't know what kind of excuse you could be giving, but you need to act and to protect this country and the people in this country. And that's not happening, because again, we have the evidence. It's not that we don't have it. And that's why it's so bold and upfront. Now we're doing this video, or these videos, and making those statements and providing the evidence and pointing you to where it is, because it's all a part of the public records in the courts, which we already said we're giving persons permission to go look at it. From our documentation, you could go in and pull anything you want, because we gave you permission. So the idea is, we want to preserve the evidence, because life is promised no man. With all the stuff that's happening out here, I could be talking to you now 5 minutes from now. Go walk along the boardwalk and some alligator rush out and drag me in. Anything could happen. A mosquito could hit me with something that nobody knows about. And then of course it's COVID-19, which is going about, which I'm contemplating to go get another booster, which itself is scary. Okay, you cannot trust these people. Are these pharmaceutical companies merely trying to make more money? That's their mantra, money and profit. So they don't mind telling us lies and ripping us off. But so do I gamble, or am I gambling to go get another booster? I think I am going to, because I'd rather have a fighting chance than not. And I believe in the science, so that's where we are now. But that said, the whole idea is that we need our law enforcement agencies to stand up, the fraud squad, and we're reaching out to the fraud squad to prosecute these people. And I'm telling people in Jamaica, the Gleaner, or the young lady I spoke to, or emailed me, or text me from the sales department of the Gleaner, said, the Gleaner warned her to stay away from this thing. It's love bug season, so they're all over the place. Alright, so thousands and thousands of these things are flying around now. You should see a car when you're driving on the highway. But she said they told her to stay away from it because one of the things I saw in the video, I don't know if they looked at it, is that names, we mention names. Now, I read the press all over the world, and if you're making allegations about somebody committing crime or doing wrong or doing something right, you mention their names. You can't be writing in abstract and then expect people to believe what's going on. We've pointed to people who we have evidence is involved in fraud and trying to rip us off and undermining the integrity of this country and the courts. And the courts are allowing them to practice in the courts. And if the court knows and is warned that these people are committing crimes and they're allowing them to practice, then pretty certain we won't have a court system that we can trust in the near future. We can't trust it now, so can you imagine? And we mentioned people in there like John Graham. Be aware of this guy. Anybody that's looking for an attorney, be aware of John Graham. He has no ethical standards. He's dishonest. Alexis Robinson from Miles Fletcher and Garden, she says she's a partner there. So if the partner there is corrupt and is allowed to be doing this, and we wrote to all of them and said, they need to stop, then the other partners need to check themselves as well and say to people, well, we either with this lady or we're not. And if they're with her, then they're part of the problem. And it's not only them, there are law firms out there that are involved in committing fraud in the court. We know this. The evidence is there. But going back to what I'm saying, we've provided evidence in the courts to justify all of this. The whole John Graham mentioned, we boldly do it because we have the evidence that he's one of those persons who have been undermining the court system and trying to mess with people's lives. Not trying to, he has been, and is succeeding because of what these people are doing. So we're not scared to mention John Graham. We're not scared to mention the judges who facilitate him, like Justice Anderson and Justice B. Morrison. And I'll say again publicly and to the JCF and the fraud squad, can a Jamaican judge appoint a trustee or an administrator for a New York State trust or estate that has no connection in Jamaica? That's one thing. Not only does it have any connection in Jamaica, but the persons who they appointed him to represent the deceased is not a Jamaican citizen, doesn't live in Jamaica, have no property in Jamaica, and they facilitated that transaction, appointing somebody trustee or administrator for an estate that doesn't exist. An estate that was probated from 2002 or settled in 2002, 2003, or even 2007. Those are the dates that are thrown out there by these people. And so, how is it that the fraud squad can allow these people to go about filing these false documents, having a judge looking at these documents, knowing that he doesn't have jurisdiction to appoint anybody? And this he did after the appeals court ruled that these people had no standing or connection to anything that we were doing. He went ahead and appointed them, giving them leverage now to come into court and claim they're in count. Now they're claiming they own one of my companies. So we know it's clearly fraud, and I'll again cite the Law Reform Fraudulent Transaction Act passed in 2013. So why aren't they being prosecuted? These judges should at least have the opportunity to explain to law enforcement and the Jamaican people as to why you refuse to enforce the rules of the court. Justice Anderson not appointing the people who own the property for the court to recognize them so they could get their damages, which the court must do under Part 19, Rule 19.3. Him saying not doing it. When the JCF alleged that they needed an order from the court to investigate fraud in the court, Justice Sykes, who was not Chief Justice then said he's not going to give the order. Why wouldn't a judge want to give an order if that's what the JCF said they need to investigate fraud in the court? So that man is now the Chief Justice. And he has not done anything to correct the situation at hand, even though evidence is in front of him. Notices and applications and requests, weekly, monthly, nothing. So just wanted to say we needed to stand up, be a stand-up person. Don't just sit there and think somebody else should be fighting your battles, because guess what, when they finish with us, they're coming for you. That's what happened to us during slavery. Our neighbors, when they raided those tribes over there or the villages, we just sit in ours and figure, oh, they're grabbing them, so let them go on with them. Not knowing that when they get them, they're going to come for you. I want to thank you, and again, taking the time to listen. Go to watch those videos. And again, I've had several of them put in place so that the more we put out, the more you'll have to look at and review, because it's putting the facts in place so that the evidence is there, so if anything does happen to us, which we've been told that what we're doing is dangerous, and in fact my freedom had been threatened, and I'll remind you that John Graham, in collaborating with these U.S. attorneys and a trustee that should have been working to protect everybody's interests, including mine, I went to court to get an order from the court to say I could not represent my own company in Jamaica. Now, of course, I reminded, this is a reminder, if I didn't say it before, to those I said it to, that a Jamaican citizen carrying a Jamaican passport. I still have my Jamaican passport. And I went to court and tell the judge, you don't have jurisdiction to do that. You can't tell anybody so they can't go to court if they're in a matter in court. I don't care how much power you have. That's illegal. And what he was trying to do is intimidate me. But the kicker is, this judge had the balls to tell me he was going to have me locked up by U.S. Marshals when I landed in the U.S. if I didn't stop coming to courts in Jamaica. Now, this is what these people did. John Graham, working with these people, and a conspiracy is he doesn't have to know 100% what they're doing, and they don't have to know 100% of what he's doing. That's what a conspiracy is about. A group of people working towards a common objective, and regardless of whether they tell everybody what they're doing, it doesn't matter. It's a conspiracy. And he is part of the conspiracy, and all these judges who facilitated them going back to the U.S. with orders from this court, which are illegal because they're fraudulent, were involved in a conspiracy. And that conspiracy threatened my freedom. Not only have they trapped me in this court system for 16 years already, with injunctions after injunctions, which are illegal because it violates my constitutional right, but they had a U.S. court to threaten my freedom. And persons who used to work for them have indicated and stated to me and other people that, yeah, on a couple of occasions when I did have to come to Jamaica for court, they had people waiting in the yard of the property for me. I don't know these people, but I was warned to be careful. And two officers from the court, uniform officers, don't know who they were, saw me once and told me I must be very careful because of what's involved and the amount of funds that's involved. My life could be taken, and they made reference to somebody they knew that happened to, that when they could make progress in the courts, that's what happened to the person. He became a victim of crime. And the first judge we spoke to, a retired judge, what he said to us at the time when Justice Beckford made her initial ruling in the matter, which we appealed and won, but she initially ruled that Capital One had the right or gave them judgment, even though we weren't even served with a summons to come to court. What that judge said to us was, wherever big money exists, anything is likely to happen. I had to really think about it, but after I repeated it like 3 times with an emphasis and anything could happen, I realized what he was saying. So in short, I want everybody to know that the evidence is on file. It's in the clouds. It's documented, and we have about 3 locations where we have the documentation. We have it with different persons. So anything that should go down that's seem funny, make sure not get them locked up, because they're involved in nefarious activities, and where big bucks are involved, anything could happen. And we know, again, and emphasize that we're not talking about $2,000 or $10 million or $12 million. The court records will show that expert witnesses have calculated that these people owe us minimal, this was just a preliminary calculation of about 18 point something billion US dollars. And when you're adding interest over this 15-year period, we're talking way past 40 to 50 billion dollars. Depending on the interest rate, of course, but nonetheless, it's significant. So hence the reason we're going through all of this. And the law enforcement must be aware of it. The DPP's office must be aware of it and step up. You can't have people's lives being threatened because some people did the wrong thing, got caught, and now in order to not pay the damages, they're trying to get rid of people one way or the other. Again, thank you very much. Consider this a part of your history. This is happening in Jamaica, part of your history. And one of the things I go back to Mr. Bolt, I'm just saying, I mentioned the wolves on Wall Street. Start looking at how you could make back your money. And one of the things you could do to make back your money is you have the clout to pull people together in the movie industry. Have them do a documentary, a detailed documentary on corruption in the courts, and see if you could recover your money from exposing it instead of simply becoming another victim of time and cost, legal costs, which you don't need to bear, because as I said, the DPP's office is going to be prosecuting, and whatever lawsuit you would file, a civil suit or other, would be dependent or influenced by that ruling, which means 2 things. You have to wait on the ruling, which we're looking at probably 4 or 5 years. A miracle if it comes before, but even 2 years. You can't be sitting around for 2 years and have no access to your money and not take measures to make more. It's as simple as that. So I wish you luck, and again, I hope you recover your money. But if it's going to be difficult and time consuming, go make some more money. Use your talent, your celebrity, and turn it around on them. Get a documentary done, so you not only benefit from the proceeds or the profits from the documentary, but you also help your country further to protect us from this ever happening again, because it will help for reform that's needed. So far, nothing has been done to reform this country's crime and corruption. Thank you, and have a good one. Bye.